Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started for today? Welcome to our National ACT virtual meetup. Looks like we're holding steady here at about 104 or so participants. So happy spring, everyone. For those of you joining us for the first time, I'm Maria, and I don't typically have a black eye. I came out the wrong side of an altercation with the road on a morning run about 3 weeks ago. So I've got this nice shiner to prove it about 3 weeks later. So, but welcome aboard. We're going to go ahead and get started right now. The first thing I just wanted to mention is our agenda for today. We're going to do some brief intros. We're going to introduce our special topic and our special presenter, Michelle Salyers, who will be talking about caring with intention for yourself, your clients, and your coworkers. And then we'll spend about a third of the time toward the end in what we call open mic, where we want to hear from you. So we'll preferably ask you to unmute yourself, and it's always nice to have you kind of interacting with one another as much as you can in this kind of webinar environment. But you can also put that information in the Q&A, and I'll tell you about a little bit more about that in a second. Our next meeting is on Monday, June 3rd, and that will be our colleagues Heidi Herrinks and Julie Templeton out of the Oregon Center of Excellence on ACT, who are going to be sharing hot off the press the new ACT nurse curriculum. So we're really excited to have them back. I know they shared about a year and a half ago their findings from a process where they developed kind of a list of different tasks that nurses do, and now they've kind of put that into a curriculum. So we're excited to have them. Related to our meetings, I did want to give you a little caveat, a little bit of sad news, but hopefully we can come out of it on the other end here positively. So we have the meeting on June 3rd, and then we have another in August, the first Monday in August. And then after that, we're not sure what's going to happen. For many of you, you may have heard that the National Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, MHTTC network, was not renewed by SAMHSA. They decided to go in a new direction. So all of the MHTTCs are ending on September 30th, which means that includes our national ACT calls as part of that. That said, we're really excited and committed to continuing to serve you and to figure out how we can continue this awesome group. So stay tuned for that. But I just wanted to give you the caveat that that is kind of the official last meeting in August for our national MHTTC. The national, the e-primer, the ACT Intro asynchronous course that Lorna and I co-developed, that will still be live. That'll be accessible to you all and still be free. And we'll figure out kind of where we archive all of our resources after that. So stay tuned. We're, hoping that we can come up with another way to continue to do this. In the meantime, though, in our remaining months of having our center still open, I wanted to point you to a new series, a learning collaborative series that is going to be coming your way. We'll have 4 meetings, and this will focus on the role of the ACT psychiatric care providers. The first one is in May, and basically these are all going to be the 3rd Thursday of every month for 4 months, from 12 to 1:30 Pacific, 3 to 4:30 Eastern. I see lots of claps and people excited about this. So please pass this on to your psychiatric care providers. And again, we will send out a notice of all of these dates and registration for that very soon because it's coming up next month. So very exciting. In the meantime, just some quick housekeeping. As you know, because of our large audience, we've got everybody muted and you won't be appearing on video unless during the open mic we unmute you. The chat box and the QA box are available for your use though, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. We are also recording today, and that recording will be available on our website after today's presentation. And I will put the link to the slides, Michelle's slides from today too, so that you guys can all have access to that as well. If you're experiencing any technical issues, you can just send a direct message to us in the chat and we can help you there. The chat is, again, it's right there at the bottom of your screen. And there may be times when Michelle or we ask you to like share a response or make a comment. You can put that in the chat, but don't put in the chat anything that you're looking for an answer to. Instead, we're hoping that you can blog those in the Q&A box that's also at the bottom of your screen. So anywhere you've got a question, that's the best place to put that to ensure that we can track those and know that we're actually answering your questions. And then again, when we get to the point of open mic, you can raise your hand and we'd love to hear from you if you've got a question or comment. And that's just, again, our opportunity to kind of learn from each other, ask, random questions that may not be related to the topic for today's didactic. So quick intros. I already kind of introduced myself, and I'm the co-director of the SPIRIT Lab, which stands for Supporting Psychosis Innovation Through Research, Implementation, and Training at the University of Washington, and also direct the Washington State Center of Excellence in Early Psychosis. And I do a lot of training and consultation on ACT nationally, and am the co-author of the TMAC, the Tool for Measurement of Assertive Community Treatment. And I'll turn it over to you, Lorna, to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Lorna Moser, and we always joke, sorry it's old, that we just get to say ditto, do a lot of the things that Maria just said. And as you also probably have heard ad nauseum, is that we're wrapping up this national ACT study. Truly are wrapping it up, truly are starting to get the deliverables out beyond the ones we've shared with you, and are excited to share all that information with you. And thank you for your participation, because I would say most of you on this call participated in some way or another through the team surveys or being some other informant.
Yes, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And yeah, as many of you know, Lorna's my work wife on the other side of the country there. So we'll continue to do this work going forward. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our wonderful presenter today, who Lorna and I have known for many years now, and that is Dr. Michelle Salyers. Dr. Salyers is a professor of psychology at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, IUPUI. She directs the ACT Center of Indiana, a collaboration of academic and community partners, including researchers, administrators, clinicians, consumers, and family members who share an interest in recovery-oriented evidence-based practices. And the overarching goal of her work is to help adults with severe mental illness live meaningful lives in their community. And her research addresses both consumers of mental health services and the providers of those services. She is increasingly targeting the interaction of consumers and providers, looking for the best way to support relationships that promote recovery and well-being. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Michelle, to say a little bit more about what's happening with you these days. So I'm going to just stop sharing my screen here and we'll turn it over to you.
Well, I am just delighted to be here. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Okay, did it work?
Looks great.
Great. So thank you so much for the invitation to come. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. It is near and dear to my heart and something I've devoted really most of my career to. I actually did my dissertation on burnout many, many years ago. I won't say how many, I'm not even sure anymore. So, and before I get started, I like to thank all the people who helped make this happen. And this isn't even all of them. But we have partnered over the years with lots of different people to work on studies related to reducing burnout and reducing turnover in the mental health field. And you'll see Maria's name listed on here. She was one of the early people who worked with us to develop a breathe intervention that we'll get into a little bit more here. And so the plan for my portion of today, I'll talk a little bit about my background and a little bit about the background related to burnout and well-being at work, and talk about some of our principles and the conceptual framework that really guides our work. And then we'll get into more of the practical things for you to think about, how to think about your needs for being able to intentionally care for yourself and your clients and your colleagues, to look at what resources and demands that you have at the workplace in particular, and some tips on being more intentional going forward. And I will have some time when we kind of pause and reflect. With a group this large, we can't get into like breakout rooms and talk very easily. But I want you to be able to spend some time thinking about these things. And so if you have a piece of paper handy, or that might be too old school, if you have another window open on your computer or your phone or whatever to be able to take some notes, you might want to do that as we go along. And we also like to start with some permissions. And one is to grant yourself permission to be fully present and available for this time and to focus on you and your well-being. And so if you're able to disconnect from your other work life for the whole session, that's what we're shooting for. If you have some crises burning in the background and you need to step away and take a call, not a problem, but we do like to have you really allow yourself this time to focus. And to try to be open to new things or new ideas, or maybe the ideas aren't new, but it's a different way of doing things, and trying them out. And if you are in a place where you can't do one of the exercises that we're talking about, then maybe you'll try it home later. So that's kind of the orientation. My background looks pretty similar to what you've already seen. So Lorna and I are actually academic sisters. We have the same advisor who probably should have been mentioned on the gratitude page, but he didn't really do anything with the intervention development for burnout, but he was the chair of my committee, so Gary Bond. So we both trained in the same program, and Maria and I have worked for a long time on ACT and related kind of implementation kinds of issues. And all of us, of course, focus on people with severe mental illness and helping clinicians provide the best care based on research evidence. And so you all are part of that. My own training and kind of philosophical background is focused on cognitive behavioral therapy and recovery-oriented care. So when I was in grad school, that was back at the the birth of the recovery movement. If you think about Bill, holy cow, I have this senior moment and just
Bill
lost
Anthony?
yes, lost his last name, Bill, and his groundbreaking paper on recovery, and I think it was 1990. So that was when I was back in graduate school. And so recovery-oriented care has been kind of part of our lifeblood and how we think about everything we do. And I've been involved with lots of training. So I was the training director for our doctoral program in clinical psychology for, I think, seven or 8 years, and have done lots of training and consultation to mental health agencies. So as you know, as ACT workers, you are in jobs that have very high stress. Lots of burnout and turnover are very common. And so when Maria and Lorna reached out to me to see if I would come and talk to you guys, on one hand, I was really excited about this opportunity because I've done so much work with burnout and turnover, and developing interventions to try to help in that area. But I also let them know a little caveat, and that is I am retiring July 1st from my academic life, and I am pursuing more of a passion in natural dyeing of fiber arts. And so I've been a lifelong knitter, a weaver. I learned to spin yarn over. Oh, thanks. I see the little hearts coming up. That's so nice. I learned to spin yarn and to dye yarn. I always have to say dye yarn. If you just say dye, people get worried. But during the pandemic, I started learning new hobbies and really decided to make that my next area. So I was worried that if I came and talked to you all, it might actually increase your turnover rates on ACT teams. And so I don't want that to happen. Unless you're ready to go and you need something else, then sometimes turnover is a good thing for an organization. But really, I have loved my work, my academic life. I love mentoring and working with people to help make their lives better. And I'm also excited for my new chapter. So, yeah. So what is burnout? And I would like to stop here and ask you to put in chat. We all have kind of our own conceptualization of what burnout really means. So if you want to put in chat, maybe one word or an image or something that kind of comes to mind when you think about what burnout is. Don't care anymore, imbalance, survival mode, loss of creativity, exhaustion. It's going so fast that I can hardly read all these. So yeah, losing hope, emotional exhaustion. Yeah. Being done in capital letters. Lacking empathy, illness. Yeah, lost motivation. Lots of related kind of concepts. Oh.
My favorite is I am a fried chicken, crispy. Did you see that one?
I missed the chicken one.
That resonates.
Yeah. Irritable, negative. Yes. So all of those things. When we think about burnout in the research world, we clump it into three different factors. So one is that emotional exhaustion, which we saw a lot of that. You're just overwhelmed. A lot of our work is called emotional labor, where we have to manage our own emotions in dealing with people in crises and helping them with their emotions. That's a lot of work. Depersonalization or feeling cynical, lack of empathy for other people. You just start to kind of separate yourself from your work. And it may be partly a coping mechanism for being so overwhelmed. And the third component is this diminished sense of accomplishment, or that you're no longer effective at your job. You're not getting things done in the way that you want to. And so when we think about this in the research world, we talk about having all three of these things. And there are different models about which may precede something else. And I think really it's an individual kind of thing about whether you start to feel exhausted and then kind of push away, or maybe you're not getting things done at work and then that makes you feel overwhelmed and less able to do more. So you may have different patterns, but when we talk about all three of these things, that's really what we mean when we talk about burnout. So how do we address it? Our first attempts, so as clinical psychologists, and Gary Morse, who we mentioned briefly, he was the person who really first started this Breathe kind of work, working with different homeless outreach teams and later more formal ACT teams and how to reduce burnout. As psychologists, we really focused initially on the individual. How do we help individuals cope with stress? How do we do resilience training and help people have the resources they need? And it really was focused on this idea of reducing burnout. But over time, we have really expanded our focus and to think it's not just about reducing the bad stuff at work or reducing burnout, but really to enhance well-being and engagement for all of us and kind of bringing in that recovery mindset about having a meaningful life. Well, we all want meaningful lives in the work that we do. And so trying to not only reduce burnout, but increase engagement and well-being. And also to really think about burnout and well-being as organizational issues. If you are feeling burned out, it is not your fault. If we just focus on the individual, it sounds like, oh, you're not doing enough. If only you would cope better or differently, your burnout would go away, right? Well, that's not it. We're all in organizations and we're in larger systems and we're in a whole cultural context. So we can't just focus only on the individual, but we can help you, so we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We still are psychologists. We're going to work with individuals, but we also need to think about broader systems. So more about our principles. I mentioned this recovery orientation, and it's always been my view that we all are recovering from something. So recovery is really a universal concept, whether it's someone recovering from their first psychotic episode, or if you've lost someone through divorce or death or some other kind of injury or illness, that we all need similar things. We need motivation, we need information, skills, and supports to do well and to recover a life of meaning. So we think about that, that we're enhancing the well-being of our clients that we work with, but we should also be thinking about ourselves and our colleagues. And I mentioned we work within organizations and systems of care. So you may not be the boss of your organization, but there are things you might be able to do to help start making that change, even within your organization. All of our work, we try to be evidence informed. So not everything is an official EBP with so many evidence-based practice with so many randomized trials, but we do try to use the best research available to guide us and being pragmatic. So we want you to have tools that you can come away with. So the way we approach this is to help people be more aware of our own well-being and the factors that support it. So what are your needs? And we'll talk a little bit today about how you can think about that. And then to use or learn new skills to address well-being at work and how to think about balancing those resources and demands that you might have. So we use some of the same approaches that we would use with clients. And our work is really informed by the job demands and resources model of burnout and DC and Ryan's self-determination theory. Okay, so identifying your needs. In understanding more of what we need, we look to self-determination theory, kind of at the individual level. And then at an organizational level, we have been influenced by appreciative inquiry, which is like a recovery for organizations. It's a strengths-based model of organizational change. And in this kind of approach, you look for every organization has strengths about it. We might have complaints about where we're working and things that aren't going right. But if your organization is still existing, there are strengths. And if we can find what those strengths are and build on them and do more of those things, then we can really start to develop a more healthy and engaged workforce at our organization. So those are kind of things that we look at. For the appreciative inquiry, I thought we would do a little exercise to kind of get a taste of what appreciative inquiry is like. And what I'd like you to do is reflect on a time when you felt at your best in your work. So take a moment and think about, it doesn't have to be like this week, it could have been years ago, whenever, but a time when you felt really excited about your work. Maybe you felt very effective, or you felt supported, or a lot of meaning or purpose in your work. So let's take a minute or two and write down a few notes for yourself about what that time was for you. And you might think about what was happening at that time when you felt at your best, and maybe what helped you feel that way. And I see a few people have already started this. If you feel so moved, you can briefly share in chat. So starting, yeah, a lot of people felt really good when you first started your work. A new role, new ideas. Fulfill a client's need, help them learn something new. Yeah, feeling like you have knowledge to offer. Yeah, seeing client progress and clients succeeding. That's really exciting. In some of our work, doing work like this at an inpatient hospital unit, they might not see the successes as much. Getting children back from the state. Yeah, facilitating groups. This is great. So this is a way to kind of reconnect with your purpose and your meaning, and what's important to you. And you can take this experience further. So when we do this in smaller groups, or if we were at a day-long retreat, we would break up into small pairs and have people really tell their stories. And that's so energizing to be able to tell your story and then also to hear from others. And so I encourage you to try this with your colleagues. Maybe you can have lunch together, or if at a team meeting, you might have some time to share a success. But doing this helps you get in touch with what brings you meaning and joy and that passion in your work. It also can help you learn more about what motivates your colleagues and how to connect with them at a different level. And it also spreads positive feelings of connection and purpose. An appreciative inquiry is a bigger organizational change approach, but it involves lots of these building on positives. And so another small thing from appreciative inquiry that I really like to do is starting with something positive. So when I would have the clinical psychology faculty meetings, we would start with a positive appreciative check-in. So what's something you're looking forward to this weekend, or what's your favorite snack? Whatever. It could be lots of different ideas. And at first people kind of teased me about it, but they really like it. And they have continued doing it even with someone else being the chair now. So you can take small steps that can bring positive things into your daily life. So that's kind of at the organizational picture, the appreciative inquiry, and that helps us as individuals think about what motivates us and what brings us passion. Another way to think about it at the individual level is looking back at self-determination theory that really talks about how we are at our best, individuals are at our best. We're most motivated when our needs are met in 3 core areas. So one is autonomy, or sense of control and direction in your own life, a sense of competence. So are you challenged and able to face those challenges? And when you feel connected with other people or with the spiritual universe or some meaning, that all 3 of those are important for all of us as humans. And we might have different levels of those needs. Some people might have more affiliation needs and need to feel connected to others, and some might have more achievement-oriented needs, and that sense of competence is important. But if you reflect on yourself in those 3 areas, you can start to think about how might you apply that at work. So autonomy, one of the key things we know from the research, autonomy supporting environments really have the best outcomes for employees. So are you able to do things independently? Do you have any control over your schedule and how things work? Do you have input on how things are happening, decisions being made at your organization? And it takes a lot of trust. And so spending time developing relationships with other people at work can be important. So some questions for your own needs, and you might think about writing these down, not necessarily in chat, but for yourself. Do you have the freedom you need to organize your day and your time and to do things the way you would like to do them? Or are you maybe at the other extreme, being micromanaged and being told everything that you need to do? And if there's an imbalance, maybe talking to a supervisor about that, and we'll get to that a little bit later. You also might think, am I able to do this work independently? Sometimes we might need more clarity around what we need to do, or sometimes we need more training. So if you're not able to do this work independently, what is it that you need? And thinking about those things. Competence, that second area, am I being challenged? So when we do this work with medical professionals, we often hear the scope of practice. So nurses and doctors, there are certain things you're supposed to do in your scope of practice. If you're constantly working below that, then you're not really getting that appropriate level of challenge, or your intellectual needs being met. But you may be having too much of that, and maybe you're constantly overwhelmed. And so thinking about how much competence do you feel in your work? And do you maybe need to learn a new technique or something there? And the last one is that feeling of connection or a sense of purpose and meaning. And that might be, how connected do you feel to your coworkers or your team? Do you know them well enough to ask for help if you needed it, or to provide help to them if they needed it? Can you connect with that sense of purpose with your clients again? Taking compliments, sometimes that's hard for people to do, especially if we're in the serving field, but really reflecting on what things are going well, and when you're told that you're doing a good job, celebrating those successes too. It's easy to kind of push them off and go on to the next thing, but really taking time to celebrate can be helpful. So just as kind of a summary, those 3 areas, that would be something that you could focus on thinking about. Do you have needs that are not being met in those 3 areas that might be able to help you? So going into the second area, really focusing on resources and demands and thinking about what that looks like. This part of our work comes from the job demands and resources theory of burnout. And this looks very complicated, but when we step through it, it's not too bad. This model really talks about how there are demands at work that can increase burnout. Some demands are challenges that sometimes they can kind of be okay. They might challenge you to be more competent in certain areas. But there are also things that are just flat out hindrances that kind of get in your way, like conflict. And so those things tend to increase burnout. Job resources, those are the things that decrease burnout and increase engagement. And from the research, we know that having clear expectations, having autonomy, getting feedback, and having room to grow, those are all things that can help you. And what was really missing from this is that we all come to our work with our own personal resources, and how that we manage our emotions, and do we manage time? How do we think about our work? Are we getting good exercise, sleeping well, nutrition? Do we have social support? So our own personal resources, and that's where our breathe work really focused. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're all in an organizational and societal context, but within your organization, do they support any sort of work-life balance? Do they have health promotion opportunities? Do you have civility and respect with your coworkers? Those are all things that can feed into your own level of burnout or engagement at work. And so the practices to build those personal resources, that's where we originally started with Breathe. And we'll go through a couple of practices today together. But at the bottom of this has the link to another Technical Assistance Center training that I did a series for them in the Southeast. In Atlanta and Emory, that we did these different practices, and these are free. They're each an hour long, but the talk part was much shorter, so you can reach out and see those if you want to get into each of these areas. The contemplative practices are really the foundation, I think, of personal resources, and start to get at more of that intentional caring and intention in what we're doing. So being mindful And mindfulness has gotten lots of press over the last 20 years, I guess. It's been a really big thing in the mental health field. But there are different ways to be mindful or contemplative. And these are things that can directly address the experience of distress and reduce your stress level and feelings of distress. And they really center around focusing on the present and meaningful activities. And they can help you kind of disengage from your work stress at the end of the day. But they're also tools that can help you throughout the day. And if you're practicing them on a regular basis, you'll notice over time being able to handle stress in a much easier way. You won't be as reactive, I guess, or upset about things. So the first one is really to focus on our breathing. We are breathing all the time, but we don't think about it often. And just something simple as focusing on our breathing and taking the time to not think about anything else, but just focus on how we're breathing and to slow down and do what we call belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing can make a huge difference. And this is something that I do before anything stressful. If I'm starting to feel stressed, I will just kind of say, I notice that I am feeling upset about something. So I'm going to take a couple of deep breaths here and just kind of stop. So you can use little triggers to kind of remind you to do this. So what I'd like to do, if you are willing, is to kind of walk through a guided breathing exercise. And I will sort of read off one of my scripts so that we're all on the same page. And when I do that, I'm going to be asking you to take these deep breaths. And when we say belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing, we want you to take the air in and use your diaphragm to really pull the air in and push it out. And so when you're breathing in, your belly kind of expands. And when you breathe out, you're contracting it in. So it's not, your shoulders aren't going up when you're breathing in, but your belly's going out. And so sometimes it helps to put your hand on your belly, which if we were in person, you would see me putting my hand on my belly, but you can't really see that. So when you're breathing in, your belly is rising and your hand is expanding. And then when you're breathing out, it's going back in or contracting. So if you're in a place where you can close your eyes and you feel comfortable and safe doing that, I would recommend you try that. If not, you can just look at this peaceful image. This is actually from my front yard in the spring, or well, more summer, I guess. But so if you feel comfortable, close your eyes, get in a comfortable position, and take a deep breath in and hold it for a second or two and breathe all the way out. And it may be helpful to gently rest your hand on your stomach and focus on making it rise and lower with your breath. Expanding as you breathe in and contracting as you breathe out. Take another deep breath in and breathe all the way out. As you breathe in again, notice the sound your breath makes as you inhale. And the sound it makes as you exhale. Breathing in deeply, in and out. You might notice the temperature, how the air feels as it comes in. And the warmth as it leaves your body. You might notice that thoughts are coming into your head. That's okay. You can notice them and then just gently return your focus back to your breathing. Breathing in deeply, expanding your tummy. Contracting back down. Now take another deep breath or two, and when you're ready, you can open your eyes and rejoin us. Okay. So that kind of breathing really, I'm not sure if it was 2 minutes or a minute and a half. It really wasn't that long. But just taking that time to focus on your breath can really slow down your heart rate and make you feel calmer in the moment. But also doing that on a regular basis can really help you overall feel much calmer. And there are different techniques that you can do with the breathing. Some people find just focusing on the breath that their mind wanders too much and it's kind of stressful for them. And so another technique is something called box breathing, where you might imagine yourself going around the edge of a box and you breathe in and count to 4, hold it for a count to 4, breathe out for a count to 4. And you can do that. And that box breathing gives you something mentally to focus on as well. And of course, in this day and age, there are lots of different apps that you can do where you can breathe with the app and maybe a balloon or something expands and closes. Another breathing technique that we use in our breathe training is alternate nostril breathing, which can be messy if you've had a cold or something, but what you do the same kind of deep breathing, the diaphragmatic breathing, where you hold one nostril closed and breathe in through one nostril. And then you change sides and breathe out. And you go back to the original, breathe in. And then breathe out. And you do that a few times. And then somewhere you want to switch, so then you're breathing in on the other side and breathing out. Breathing in and out. So for some people, the actual physical movement of moving the thing really helps them feel more grounded, and that keeps their mind from having all the stuff fly in there. So you might like the alternate nostril breathing. The first workshop we did, there was a open-ended comment when we ask, what did you like about the training? And one of the people said the alternate nostril breathing, she thought it was really weird when we first started it, but then she realized that she could give people the finger at work while she was exercising. I just thought that was so funny. Anyway, so there's lots of different contemplative practices you can do. So the breathing is really that core kind of thing you can do anywhere. Other mindfulness kind of activities, focusing on sounds or focusing on tastes if you're eating something, practicing more guided imagery and meditation. Yoga is excellent for this. And prayer. For people who are religious, praying is also a contemplative kind of quiet exercise that you can do. And I really want to emphasize the intention in all of this work so that those contemplative practices are about choosing to focus on the moment and the present. And I think that is even more important today. I feel I've had lots of conversations with colleagues since the pandemic and all the smartphones, and feeling like, do we all have attention deficit disorder? I feel like I'm trying to multitask and do so many things. And I just feel constantly bombarded. And a lot of us have experienced more anxiety over the past few years. So having those smartphones and the technology combined with the pandemic, and then all of the global strife and the wars and divisions, they're in our face all the time now. And since the beginning of time, there have been other pandemics and strife, but we didn't all know about it, So you could be in your own happy world if you weren't having a pandemic or problems in your area. You just didn't know about it. And so now I think we really do have to be very intentional about our focus and our time. And if you want to be on your Instagram and other social media, that might be fine if you intentionally set aside a certain amount of time and then turn it off. Because if you're always looking at it or always responding to emails or always looking at texts, you're not ever able to focus. And so we have to be very intentional. And if you need some more help with trying to be intentional, one of my favorite poets, I'm not very much of a poet kind of person. I'm more of a pragmatic, down-to-earth person, but I love Mary Oliver because she describes things in a very easy to access way. And she has a poem about a summer day where she is out in the field and looking at grasshoppers and really focusing on the present. And in it, she talks about how all of us die one day. And so how do we want to spend our time? What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? So that's a wonderful poem. And some other good reading, 4,000 Weeks. It says time management for mortals, but it's really not a time management book. It's more than that. And I came across this early pandemic times when I was feeling overwhelmed with all the stuff I had to do and figuring out how to do it all on Zoom and help everyone with pandemic stress that were contacting me about burnout and stuff, and just felt overwhelmed. And I read this book, and it's really a reminder that we all have approximately 4,000 weeks on this planet. And so it's up to us to think about how we want to spend them and what we want to do. And it was so funny. I was telling other people about this book, and I would refer to it as 40,000 weeks. And then I realized, oh my God, it's not 40,000 weeks. It's only 4,000 weeks. So it sounds stressful, but when you read the book, you'll feel better. I really love that book. Another way to get that intention back is to reconnect with what's important. So we did that little exercise earlier. Many of you looked back at your most meaningful time, and that's when you first started your job for some of you. Well, what was it that brought you to this work? What is it that brings meaning to you? And then you can use those to put reminders in your workspace or your office or your car. Maybe a picture of something that reminds you of what it is that brings meaning. And as we mentioned earlier, sharing it with your colleagues, starting a meeting, maybe with a meaningful moment or something like that. And then being intentional about your time. So what are your own boundaries? How much do you want to work? How much do you need to work? What is your work-life balance? Are you someone who needs or wants to keep your work life and your home life separate, where you have clear boundaries? At the end of the day, I'm turning off my work email and I'm not looking until tomorrow? Or are you someone who integrates and maybe you do a little bit of work and take some time off for your kids' baseball game and go back and forth? And that may vary. Different people have different needs. And so thinking about what are your boundaries? And then setting boundaries, which can help with your sense of autonomy and also competence. So limiting things that drain your energy. So some of the things you might do, block time for email responding. Don't have your email open all the time where you're getting messages and you're constantly responding, because your focus, there's something called cognitive residue from the last thing you were doing, and you try to shift your focus, you still have that cognitive residue. You think you're being effective and you're doing all this stuff, but you're really not more effective. So having that block time, trying to schedule time for returning or making phone calls. Now, some of you, if you're running a crisis line, you can't let the phone go to voicemail. But if you have the ability to, let it go to voicemail. If people are really wanting to talk to you, they will leave a message or they will text you, and you can text them back when it's convenient for you, unless you're holding the crisis line. Then you have to answer the phone. Meeting, someone wants to have a meeting, understand what it's for and make sure you know. And then don't volunteer to fix all the messes first. Sit on your hands and let someone else take the hot potato if you're a person who tends to volunteer to help. And then in your boundaries, not only are you trying to limit things that take away your energy, you want to put in things that bring you energy, that fill you up, that build on your strengths. And so whether that's, dyeing some yarn and enjoying some color at the end of the day, you might want to focus on some of your hobbies. Or if you're good at mentoring or you like helping other people, maybe you volunteer to be a coach for a new staff member or something like that. So you can think about not only what you can cut out, but what can you bring in? And setting goals and prioritizing them. And in that 4,000 Weeks book, he talks about that. We all have these to-do lists. These are options that you might do, and you can rearrange them in your priorities and they can shift. It doesn't mean you have to do them all and you have to do them all today. So thinking about your goals differently. And finally, asking for what you need. And this is really hard for some people, actually for many people, to ask for something that feels like it might be a conflict, or if you need a raise or you need more time off, you might have a lot of emotion around that. And this is a nice little book that you can read in an afternoon. And I give it to all my graduate students. I've given it to my kids. But it's a nice way to think about how do we have those conversations to be more effective, and that We don't just want to be silent, and we don't want to confront people directly. We need to have a way to have dialogue that is effective. So that is the end of my actual presenting, but we can do questions and answers. And I also have my email that you can reach out if you have questions and things later. So,
Thank you, Michelle. Wonderful. So far, the main questions were just about getting links to some of the resources you shared. So we went ahead and put those in the chat and responded to in the answers. Any other questions or comments from folks for Michelle? A lot of comments along the way, so that was great.
okay, yeah.
I think one of the, oh, go ahead, Lorna.
I was just going to share a supportive thing I saw a team do once that I thought was really cool. I don't know if they maintained it over time, but it was a great idea. Is in the daily team meeting room, one of their dry erase boards, because we love some stuff on the walls in a daily team meeting. They would have the staff names listed, and every morning before the meeting, they would scale themselves in terms of how they're doing that day on a 1 to 10 scale. And then if you were in the lower end and not doing as well, you could specify support that would be helpful for you that day. So it was a way to communicate to the team, kind of as a group, like, this is not a really good day for me. Wednesdays, I tend to see 6 or 7 people. It would really help me if we can find a way to see 5 people today, so it was a neat way to kind of like use the daily team meeting to kind of like make that a normal part of the culture of the team.
That sounds great. Yeah. Sometimes I would start off like with the appreciative check-in in my classes, and then one of my student feedback was, sometimes I feel pressure to say something positive when I don't want to be positive or I'm not feeling positive. And so I mix it up a little bit and ask people if they feel like sharing just how are things going for you today, and kind of getting a gauge where people are. I really like that idea.
Michelle, I have a question about, and I think someone else had maybe a similar kind of question in terms of like building some of this into their daily work within an ACT team. I guess, as you can imagine and know all too well yourself, just some of the things you brought up can feel like, they're antithetical to ACT. So like having a lot of autonomy or, not feeling micromanaged and like things like that. And I'm curious, and, maybe others can share too, if you've, had ways to do that, but like, how can you build some of that stuff in if
Yeah.
you have any thoughts on that?
So, I guess that it depends on like your level in an organization too, and what kinds of tasks you have to do. And so some roles on an ACT team might have more autonomy about their schedule, or maybe you have to visit these clients, but do you have to do it in a certain order, or can you arrange your visits in a certain way? That might be like small things. You can also think about it in the grand scheme of your life. And so maybe if you are in a position that you don't have as much autonomy, where are other places in your life where you can take more control or more direction of how you want to spend your time? Those are some trade-offs. I think sometimes it also comes down to your direct supervisor. And some supervisors are better at autonomy support and getting feedback from the people they work with, and some people are not as good at that. They may not realize that they're not as good at that. They may have their own personality structure that they want a lot of control and structure. And so sometimes having those crucial conversations can help. Getting to know people as people can help. So sometimes, like within a team, you could think about if you're starting to do more sharing at your team meetings and getting to know what motivates people and what helps them be more effective, you might be able to start conversations about when are we all at our best? And if autonomy is a big part of that, then how can we get more of it and make it a team conversation? So those are just a couple of ideas, but yeah.
I know we've seen some people working within ACT teams or even within agencies that have these ACT teams where they do get a lot of PTO, time to kind of balance some of that. So like, even though it's intense when they're working for the ACT team, they also can take, we have one agency, it's like, 2 weeks, at a time kind of thing off. And so they've had to more build that into like their staffing and their scheduling. Of course, this also assumes there's no turnover and you're well
Right.
staffed and all of that. But, yeah, we do see some ways that people kind of work around that, recognizing, when you're in a team-based model, that some of that can be a little tricky. At the same time, being together and having, that sense of like collegiality and camaraderie and building in, potlucks. And, we had one team that just like regularly had, just shared meals together and,
Yeah.
whether they would do a mindfulness, the singing bowl, at the beginning of their daily team meeting every day, like just
Oh,
for a minute, observe just 1 minute of mindfulness, that kind of stuff. So
yeah. That's really nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
Well,
see in the question
oh,
box. Are you
yeah.
there? Okay. With the, somebody was asking about where they could get more information on appreciative inquiry for the sake of organizational change. I'm wondering if the link to the 3 modules, if you have more on that topic there for them to check out or have another resource.
Yes, there is a different training I did for the same technical assistance center that was longer. It was on building a resilient organization or building a resilient workforce, something like that. It's much longer, but it does talk a little bit more. But if you can go on Amazon.com and look up appreciative inquiry, or maybe I don't want to promote Amazon. Local bookstores, they can order it for you. But David Cooper Ryder is the name of the guy who originally developed it. But there's lots of books about appreciative techniques that you can use.
I
Yeah.
found it. Did you already put it in the chat? No. Okay, let me just put that, also the link to that other webinar.
Thank you, Madison, for the alternative to Amazon. I do try to support our local bookstores, but sometimes there are things that you have to go to Amazon.
And are there any other
Yeah,
ways? We've got another.
appreciative techniques. Good.
Oh, great. Perfect. There was also a question about just how can we.
Let's see. SAMHSA. So there's another question on provide burnout prevention to organizations who don't have policies in place. There is a resource that SAMHSA developed last year or the year before. I was on the committee to help develop it, and it was for another, it might have used the term resilient organizations. Let me look for that. But that is, well, I guess, can I stop sharing my screen so I can Google something?
Mhm.
Okay. Stop share and let me look at this SAMHSA. It was specifically for organizations. Yep. December 12th, 2023, addressing burnout in the behavioral health workforce. And it's a guide for organizations, and it should be free as far as I know. I'll put the link in. That might be something worth checking into or sharing with your supervisor or the organization. Let's see. Host and panelist. Okay, I put that in there.
Liz also has a question. Do you have time for one more question, Michelle?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, my
great.
next meeting is in 12 minutes.
Okay, great. Liz, I'm going to unmute you. I'm going to allow you to talk here. Oh, maybe this is this
Oh,
Heidi?
sorry. Yeah, this is Heidi. I guess I'm listed under Liz.
I know. I was like, wait, I see Liz's name, but then I recognized your face there.
Oh, so you can see me on screen?
Just your beautiful picture.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So I guess I just wanted to offer a resource that a lot of ACT programs in Oregon use. Dr. Phil Shapiro is one of the psychiatrists on an ACT team here in Portland at Central City Concern, and he's written this amazing book called Healing Power. And I think if you Google it, you can maybe even find copies of it online. But he has this really wonderful approach that a lot of ACT programs have adopted in Oregon, that kind of where he calls it the healing wheel, right? And he characterizes different problems that, either participants can be facing or even staff members can be facing. So things like anger or loneliness or loss or illness, right? We all face these things as a common part of our lives. But then he offers, for any kind of issue or trouble, he offers methodologies that you can put into practice, like yoga, like service, like getting connected with people or various activities, and then connects that with a healing quality, what he calls healing qualities. So understanding or harmony or forgiveness or love or patience. And so, if you have kind of any of those issues, you can employ sort of any of those methodologies and then embrace those healing qualities that really help to promote inner healing. And so several ACT programs have, as part of their daily team meeting, taken on, like, we want to practice or put into practice understanding today. So that'll be our healing quality that we sort of stay mindful about throughout the day. And then that really kind of helps guide practice for that day. Or maybe on another day that they would say, we really need to focus in on patience, or that's something that would really help us in terms of structuring our work. So it's just a wonderful approach that I highly recommend.
I like that. And it is very intentional. If you're thinking about, this is what we're going to focus on today, or this is what we need to do today. It's like the yoga practice of setting an intention for today. I like that a lot.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you.
Let's see. I know. Let me just quickly figure out how to get you off. I know how to do this. Hold on. Okay. Go ahead and shift gears here. Thank you so much, Michelle. We really appreciate you being here, and it's wonderful to see you again.
Yeah, it's great seeing you guys. And I had so much fun talking to all of you. So thanks for having me here. And I guess, is my part done, or do you need me to hang out?
I think your part is done. You can grab a glass of water between meetings or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, go do some knitting.
get my knitting with me.
Oh, perfect. You really
Yeah.
do.
My next meeting is with a yarn or a yarn store owner, so that's fun.
Oh, that's so awesome. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. This was so great. We really
Thank
Okay, it was
you.
great seeing you all, and
great to see
have a
you.
great rest of your afternoon.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
email
thank
me.
you.
Any of you can email me. That email stays good as a faculty member. My one benefit for retirement is that I can keep my email.
Oh,
So
great.
if people need anything, I'm happy to help. So,
Awesome. Thank you so much.
all right. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Michelle. All right. Well, we've got a few minutes here to just jump into any open mic questions, comments, anything that folks just want to bring up with everyone else. I'm going to just use a couple of seconds here to just put in the chat. I know we had some questions about the dates for the ACT Psychiatric Care Provider Series. And just so you all know, again, the registration hasn't gone out yet, but at least just to put some save the dates out there. And these will be the third Thursdays of every month starting in May through August. So I will put those in the chat. And then it looks like, let's see, as people have, just want to compare notes about anything, like if you have just a burning question about anything related to ACT practice or staffing or turnover or interviews or how you run your daily meeting or whatever it is, feel free to put that in the Q&A or raise your hand and we'll unmute. And I will be right back here as I put this in the chat.
And I'll find Michelle's email address to drop in too, because I see that.
And it looks like we've got a hand up. So I'll go ahead and, all right. And you just have
Hello.
to, hello.
Hello, yeah. Hello, Lana. I'm sorry. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, I'm good. Glad to be here. Thank you so much for hosting this ACT consultation meeting.
You bet. You bet. Did you have a question at all that you wanted to bring up in the open mic time?
I sure do.
Okay, great.
My question for you both, how can supervisors in for example, a mental health organization, how can they be flexible towards their colleagues' needs when it comes to burnout? Because I know I faced burnout in my whole career as a peer support specialist. But I think burnout can happen to anybody. And yeah, how can an organization be more accommodating or a supervisor more flexible towards the needs of colleagues?
Yeah, it's a great question. We should have kept Michelle on here a little bit longer. I know she had some thoughts about some of that at the organizational level, because I think you're right that a lot of this, it's about each of us as individuals. But as she said, a lot of times when we're burned out, it's not our fault, that there's often a lot of, more going on at the organizational level that we need to address. And so there were some ideas about just how, schedules could potentially be made more flexible. Gosh, what were some of the examples she gave? I know I gave one just around like, some organizations have had a little bit more time that people could take off. And then when people are actually scheduled to do the work, then they're obviously a lot, busier, as typically ACT teams are, having other opportunities to just be able to enjoy each other's company, like, potlucks and, those kinds of things. What else was she sharing, Lorna? I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head. And by the way, this will be recorded. So, or it is being recorded, I should say. So we will share at the same place that I shared the link to the slides, the link to what she shared more specifically, because I feel like she answered some of those questions earlier. Can you think of any others, Lorna? Just off.
I think some of them that come to mind, and I've been monitoring the chat with some ideas too. is, I think, like you said, with where you can have flexibility to give that can often. And I see somebody speaking, actually, it was Christine sharing that sometimes our supervisors and team leaders don't get invested in to get training on how to be a good supervisor. So investing in them to learn how to develop the skills to better support staff would be one organizational support. When I think about the self-determination theory framework with autonomy and competence and connectedness, I think examples that you all have shared and we've seen, finding time for the team to just be together as a team, whether that is a quarterly potluck or you do staff retreats where you can come and connect with each other on a deeper level and as people. And then competency. I think the more we find ways to utilize staff in the areas that they are really good at and they're interested in. So we see this sometimes where teams get pulled into this crisis mode or just only operate as these kind of case manager type teams. And you don't get to draw from all the things that you've been trained in and have experience in and are excited to do. So I think being thoughtful about how we use staff to build on that competence and feedback, the feedback piece of it, as she pointed out, like finding ways to give authentic recognition to people and their contributions. And the small things matter because the small things tend to be big things for us in the act world too. And then with autonomy, yes, a lot of scheduling happens through the daily team meeting, but I think there's a lot of accommodations around, like, are you somebody who really wants to work a 4-day week and can you make that work for the team and yourself? Are you somebody who likes to come in early in the morning and you want to be the early person coming in so your day ends later and the team can flex when the daily team meeting is happening to accommodate the schedules of the staff? I think there can be a lot of control over schedules if I'm truly being used as the employment specialist, I will have some control over my schedule because I'm the one kind of like dictating some terms around who needs what from me in terms of job supports. So I think it could come from a lot of different ways, different places. I saw the simple thing that Amy shared around protecting time for documentation. You should not be bringing this stuff home. We have to find ways to be smarter about how time gets used. I will quote Stacy here, my colleague who's on here, that there's no magically delicious time to get all this other stuff done. So, it's burnout if you're sitting at 9 o'clock watching whatever show and getting your service notes done. So those are just kind of like some quick things that come together for me.
I also wonder too, you mentioned that you're a peer specialist in an ACT team, and I think this can be true of all the roles on the team, but I think that especially for peer specialists, that to have a community where there's an opportunity to be able to connect with other peer specialists, whether they're, if you're in a state where there are other ACT teams and, if there's kind of a training or technical assistance center that can convene the peer specialists to kind of all come together. I think there's a lot of sense of community. Your role is really unique. Your experience is really unique. And it's not like over clinicalizing, for lack of a better term, your role to be able to kind of connect with other peers in terms of kind of what your experiences are on the team. And if there aren't other ACT teams in your state or other ways to do that, a lot of agencies hire other peer specialists. And so even connecting with other peers in your agency, even if they're not working within an ACT team, I think can also be really helpful. And like I said, I think it's true for all the roles. It's not just for the peer, but I think peers in particular, I think can feel more isolated from the rest of the team because they are a non-clinical team member. And so that feeling of like camaraderie, I think is really important. Hopefully those are some good additions to what you learned earlier.
Yes, thank you so much.
You bet. And there's a good list in the chat as Lorna pointed out. So
yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Offering to answer my question.
Absolutely. All right.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Oh, good catch. I missed that. They shared that they were a peer because you're right. That adds a whole nother level of attention to support.
let's see. So we did have a question in here that I think is maybe a good place to end today. And it may be like a bigger question, but the question was about Rosemary brings up wanting to know how other teams utilize their nurses. And so this might be a good one, whether people want to share. You can raise your hand if you want to just share more about what your nurses do on the team. And again, this is very brief because I know we've only got like 3 minutes before the end of the time, or feel free to put it into the chat. But also recognizing that our next time we all get together on June 3rd, the topic will focus on the role of ACT nurses and rolling out more related to the ACT specific training curriculum for nurses. Oh, good. Thank you, Eric. Eric's gonna, it looks like, is it typing vigorously and adding the duties of your nurse? It'll be good to kind of see what that list is. Anyone else want to add to that or want to just share live? Oh, good. Madison, let's, I will unmute you here. Oh, maybe not. Oh, there you are. Sorry, this is the wrong person. Hold on. I thought I saw a hand up. Madison, if you still wanted to put your hand up, feel free. Sometimes people think that they're clapping. They actually are raising a hand, or it's just a quick blip. Oh, good. We've got a few comments in here. Helping with LAIs. Yeah, we've got is going to be a lot more specificity, I think, to this next topic in June. Heidi, I know you're on. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know your group has done a very thorough process that you'll, I'm sure, share more about in June, but just about how you really pulled together kind of all of the different roles of a nurse, particularly on the ACT team, because this question comes up because it's really unique, I think, and the fact that, you have this capacity to go out into the community and connecting to other providers, specialty care, primary care, dental. So we see a lot of those in the list here on the chat too. So thank you for adding those. And maybe we'll end there. I think it's a good opportunity just for us to end on time. Feel free to go ahead and continue to add. We'll keep the chat open here for the next minute or so. But in the meantime, we hope that you guys will join us on June 3rd and keep an eye out for the notification and registration for the ACT Psychiatric Care Provider Series, which will be starting in mid-May. And we're really excited to get that off the ground here. And our very last call, at least under the MHTTC, will be August 5th. And hopefully we'll have some news on one of our upcoming calls here on how we can hopefully keep these meetings going further, because it's certainly been fun for me, and I know it's been fun for you too, Lorna. So we hope we can kind of keep this going, but stay tuned. We'll figure out how. All right. Take care, everyone.
Yes.
See you in 2 months.